Hey guys, Mike here from Lunch Money Comics. I have something a little bit different today. Sometimes I like to put out these short midweek videos when the content is a little bit different or, it doesn't organically fit into one of my other videos. A little while back, I got some comic books that were very dirty, very stained, very creased, and I was going to have my friend Jeff at Comic Spa fix them up. I vowed at the time that I would show you guys the results. Well, the results are in and they are nothing short of extraordinary. Not only that, I had Jeff actually give me a rundown of every single step he did and took pictures of the whole thing. And let me just tell you this right now, he did a lot more than a simple clean and press. You guys are going to want to see this. Before I show you guys the results, you know the spiel. Go down, hit that like button, leave me a comment. I love reading them. Feel free to subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. Now let's talk about the books. So about a month ago, I did my 2,000 subscriber giveaway, and guys, I had an absolute blast doing it. It was a lot of fun. But in that video, I got a couple of comic books from His and Her Comics in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Now, the store recently had bought a comic book lot from a local, and they were all like Bronze Age books, but they were stored down in the basement, and they weren't protected. So a lot of them were pretty musty or dirty or stained. And although there were some absolute gems that came out of that collection, a lot of the more, beat up books, he was selling very, very cheap. So I was able to get a couple of books I was quite happy to get, regardless of their condition. I'll make sure to put some footage up right now so you can remember what they were. The first one was an X-Men 95, The Death of Thunderbird. As an X-Men collector, I was really excited to find this comic book, but it was very heavily stained. And because of that, I was able to get it for $40, which I thought was a fantastic deal. The other book was in even worse shape. It was Avengers 144, the first appearance of Patsy Walker as Hellcat. And the issues with this one were obvious. Not only was it stained and a little torn, but it had been folded right down the middle. So when I mentioned to the owner that I was going to get these books, cleaned and pressed by Comic Spa, he just gave me the Avengers book. He said, here, take it, see what he can do with it. So I decided I was going to send these comic books to Comic Spa and that I would show you guys the results when they came in. But when I gave them to him, I said, you know what, if you're already going through these steps of cleaning and pressing them, maybe you can take some pictures and give me a step-by-step so I can talk about it on the channel exactly what was done. So that's exactly what he did. So here we go. Let's start with the X-Men 95 and see what goes into a basic dry cleaning and press. So there are a lot of small details in this process that we just don't have time to get into. So I'm just going to give you the basic steps, and if you have any further questions, you're certainly encouraged to reach out to Comic Spa directly. But step one is simply evaluating the book. He inspects the book up close and takes pictures of every single defect he can see, but he also labels them, noting which ones can be improved or not, and then he sends the pictures to the client with a recommendation for what needs to be done to the book. This way the client can be sure he wants the book worked on and what improvements he can actually expect. So you can see here on my X-Men book that there were a lot of creases, indentations, ticks, and even a slight roll. But the biggest problem was, of course, that staining, which you can see not only appeared on the cover, but had permeated through many of the interior pages of the book. Assuming you still want the book to be worked on, he moves on to the dry cleaning steps. And it's quite simply, he takes a dry paper towel and very carefully starts cleaning the front and back of the book. And you'd be surprised at how much foreign substance and dirt can be removed with just a paper towel. But sometimes they'll often use like the polymer erasers you see here. And of course, they'll carefully fix things like dog ears and folds before moving on to the pressing steps. So he has several hot presses, which you can see here, and he starts by squaring off the book using a heat press at low temperature and pressure just to align the pages. Then he puts print paper and backing boards inside the covers and in the center of the book to not only give it a flat surface, but to protect the book from the direct heat of the press. He then presses the book at a higher temperature and pressure for 10 minutes, then shuts off the heat and lets it sit for 24 hours. So after those 24 hours are up, he takes the book out of the press and using a handheld humidifier and a small tack iron, which you see here, he eliminates the smaller creases and ticks that weren't eliminated in the heat press outright. Then depending on how the book looks, he'll often have to heat press it a second time for another 24 hours. But after the book is adequately cleaned and pressed, he moves on to the buffing step. He basically lightly buffs the front and back covers using some very high-tech tools, paper towels, and this wool sock. He only uses paper towels that are dye and scent free, and he hand washes the wool sock with distilled water and line dries it between uses. And you guys would be amazed at how much gloss there is in a comic book cover and how that gloss just comes out in the buffing process. The last step is to put the book in a cold press for 24 hours. He does this by simply putting a thick piece of plexiglass on top of the book and then adding weight. You see here it's about 11 pounds. Then the book is done. He shows the client the results and posts pictures of the finished book on the CGC forums to get an opinion on the grade. So that's what goes into a simple dry clean and press. And Comic Spa estimates, 85 to 90% of the books that he works on, that's all he does. And that's all I've ever had him do on my books up until now. So I will show you the X-Men 95 in a minute, but I want to quickly talk about what you can do to books when they're in even worse shape. Case in point, the Avengers 144. Now this book had such a heavy crease, simply pressing it all by itself is just not going to take that crease out. So for books that are heavily creased or they are extremely dirty and stained, you can take one other really big step, and that is called an aqueous bath. Now, fair warning to those of you who are squeamish about these things being done to comic books, this entails removing the staples and putting the pages in water. Yeah, it was pretty crazy to me the first time I saw it, but I have to reiterate, Comic Spot is an absolute professional. He worked in the paper business, so it's everything about paper. I've seen the results in person. It's miraculous. It does not look like it went into water. For those of you who are worried that this process will have an adverse effect on the book, just know that he only uses water. Tap water and distilled water. There's no additives, no chemicals, doesn't even use soap. And he does this so that you're just removing things that don't belong in the book and you're not adding anything. This is important because if you wanted to get that book, say, graded, it would not be considered restored. You wouldn't get a purple label, right? It's just removing the dirt and the staining from the book and getting it more pliable so that you could press it. It's also worth pointing out that this is sort of an extreme case for a book. It's time intensive. It's a lot of work. It's usually not worth doing unless the book has high value or a sentimental value at the very least. And the most important thing is his motto is the same as that of a doctor. First, do no harm. So if there is any chance whatsoever of the book being adversely affected, he doesn't do it. And this is especially true with the staples. Obviously, to do this process, you have to open the staples up. So we inspect them very closely. If these staples are damaged in any way, they have any rust whatsoever, or anything that says that they could potentially be broken or not put back exactly the same, you don't do it. Simple as that. So we thought it would be fun to actually have the 144 go through this entire process. I don't really care about the book. I just wanted to see what he can do. With that being said, let's go through the steps that it takes to actually put a book through an aqueous bath. Once again, this will be the lightning fast version of events. First, he removes the staples to take the book apart. Once again, there are many considerations taken to the condition of the staples. If there's any risk of them breaking at all, you don't take it apart, thus no bath. Once it is apart, the next step is to put the cover into what he calls a soaking frame. It's kind of like a flat basket, and he puts what's called ramie paper on either side of the cover to protect it from the basket. Then it goes into the aqueous bath. It's basically warm tap water that's gone through a filtration system, and about after 20 minutes or so of soaking, he removes it and soaks it in distilled water only, lightly agitating it by hand. Then it's time to dry it. He takes it out of the bath and puts it between paper towels with some weight on top, and he constantly replaces those paper towels to get it drier and drier. Once the cover is mostly dry, he puts it under fresh paper towels under glass with some weight on top overnight, and this allows it to dry completely flat. Now, normally you would just do this process for the cover, but in a case like the Avengers 144, where the fold goes all the way through the book, there's no way you're going to get it flat unless you do this to all of the pages in the book to make it pliable enough to flatten it out. So that's exactly what he did. He went through the exact same process with each interior page, soaking and drying them, and then once everything was dry, he carefully put the book back together using the original staples in the exact same configuration, and then proceeded on with the exact same pressing steps I mentioned earlier. So here are the final results of the Avengers 144. As you can tell, it is flat, but you can't really appreciate how much better it looks unless I show you some close-up pictures. So here comes some before and after pictures. Before, obviously, it was very, very creased, that significant peak right there. And this is after. It's as flat as a pancake. I don't know if you can tell, but it's also much glossier and much cleaner. All the pages are justified. It just presents a lot better. Now, this book was given to me because of how bad the condition was. So I'm pretty happy to have a book that presents this much better. I want to point out one more thing. I mentioned that he sends pictures into the CGC forums to get their opinion on the grade. That's exactly what he did here. You see the consensus was that it's a 4.5. So this definitely wasn't a 4.5 before. Pretty cool to actually get a book that, I got for nothing because of the bad condition and end up with, a 4.5 of the first appearance of an Avengers character. Pretty cool. But I actually skipped over something a little while ago. When I showed you that X-Men 95 book being worked on, I only told you the steps of dry cleaning and pressing. That's what I have done on most of my books. The truth is he actually did the Avengers book first to show me sort of what can go into them and how much better they look. And then after I saw that, he asked, do you want to do it for the X-Men 95 book? Now this is a book I actually do want for my personal collection and I do care about, and it was very heavily stained. And I said, why not? So that being said, we actually went through the same process as the Avengers 144 on the X-Men 95. So here are the pictures. He took the whole thing apart and each individual page went into the bath one at a time. And you can see as soon as the water hit it, it revealed just how extensive the staining actually was. So each page was washed, dried, reassembled, squared up, heat pressed, cold pressed, and here is the final result. So here it is, X-Men 95, fresh back from its spa treatment. It's cleaner, it's brighter, the colors are better, it's glossier, there's no creases or folds. It looks fantastic. But to really give you a good appreciation for it, let me show you the close-up before and after pictures. So here you go. Here is a before image of the top of the cover. You can see just how dirty it was, especially along like that white top edge. It was literally covered in dirt. You also see a crease going through that 25-cent mark on the left. And on the right-hand side along the edge of the page, there was a curl. Well, here comes the after. You can see it is much brighter. All of that dirt has been removed. The whites stand out, the colors stand out. That crease on the left has been eliminated, and so is the curl on the edge of the page. Now let's go down to the bottom of the book. You see the obvious worst part was the staining in the word War Hunt. You see on the left-hand side, there was that spine roll, and on the right-hand side, once again, you see that curled edge page. Well, here comes the after. Although the stain is still there, it is definitely remarkably lessened. You see the spine curl on the left is gone, and you also see that the right-hand side edge of the page is flatter. Now, each subsequent page in the book, that stain had gone through them. So you see the first page here before, that really obvious yellow stain. Well, here comes the after. You can barely see it. And honestly, guys, in the camera itself, in the photograph, it's far more obvious than with the naked eye. When I'm looking at it, you can barely see it. And as you go through that book, that stain gets less and less and less. It looks fantastic. And probably the most remarkable thing, here is a picture of the back cover, and you can see the gloss that came out from the buffing in the book. And on the front of the cover, man, not only is this thing really flat and limber and it looks great, but man, that gloss is remarkable. I love the way the gloss looks on these Bronze Age books. So there you go, guys. 2 books that came from an old, musty collection that were in pretty bad shape, cleaned up with some pretty impressive techniques by Comic Spa. A lot of the questions I get are regarding Comic Spa, what his operation is like, how to contact him. I always make sure to put a link down in my description to his contact information. Go check it out. If you have any further questions about this system, you're better off just, emailing him directly. He'll let you know about his techniques and what he charges and all of that. So I hope some of you found that educational or at the very least interesting. I know I find the entire process pretty fascinating. But go down to those comments, guys, and definitely let me know. What do you think about the books? Do you think they came out really good? Do you think it was worth doing? And definitely let me know what you think about the process. Do you think it's really cool? Do you think it's a great thing to do to books? Do you think it's terrifying to take a book apart and put it in water? I'd love to hear your comments, and I'm sure Comic Spa would too. In the meantime, guys, this has been Lunch Money Comics. I hope you keep finding comic books in strange and unusual places, because no matter how beat up they are, you can always find someone to clean them up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.